Under the harsh glow of the studio lights, Song Kang's voice trembled, not from the script, but from memory. It wasn't supposed to be an emotional interview. Yet as the cameras rolled and silence filled the room, the actor's eyes grew distant. His words heavy with confession. "I've hidden Kim Yoo-young for years," he said softly, each syllable cracking like porcelain. What followed wasn't a scandal, but a revelation, a portrait of love, guilt, and all the quiet sacrifices fame demands. The lights were never meant to feel this bright. In the studio's insulated hush, the usual choreography of interview day played out, mics tested, water poured, cue cards stacked in a tidy fan, the red tally lamp winking like a tame ember above the camera. Nothing, in other words, suggested a storm. And yet the air had that low, anticipatory pressure. The kind you feel before rain, the kind that tells you something is about to break. Song Kang sat perfectly straight in the chair, hands folded. The line of his jaw calm as a horizon. He is famous for this tranquility, directors trust it. Stylists build frames around it. And cameras linger over it like a secret. But up close you see the small tells, the thumb tracing the ridge of the knuckle. The breath that goes a little shallow just before hard questions. Today, the tells were louder. Today, his quiet couldn't hold. The interviewer began gently. Career arcs. Scripts that changed him. The way fame, like the tide, advances and retreats on its own schedule. He answered with the practiced warmth of a man who knows how to be both honest and careful. And the crew relaxed into the rhythm. Then came a pivot, a producer's intuition or perhaps simple fortune. You have a reputation for protecting the people you love. What does protection mean to you now? A visible pause. A subtle stall in his gaze as if it had snagged on a memory. It means, not letting them carry what isn't theirs, he said. Voice steady. And then, like a hairline crack widening down a pane of glass, something in his composure gave way. The breathing changed. The eyes glossed. He looked past the lens, toward the space where reality thins and truth waits. I've hidden Kim Yoo-young for years, he whispered. No spin. No smile. Just the sentence. Exposed and shivering in the light. Silence is rare in studios. Even when the cameras stop, humans fill the quiet with nervous laughter, directions, chatter about traffic. But a silence like this one, the kind that settles with the absoluteness of snow, demands reverence. The interviewer glanced at the producer looked at the floor. Someone nudged the tissues closer. He didn't notice. Tears are not new to show business. There are rehearsed tears, grateful tears, endorsement-safe tears. The ones gathering in his eyes were none of those. These came from somewhere unlit and unmonetized. The long corridor where time stacks up and you meet your younger self standing alone at a door he isn't brave enough to open. He pressed a thumb to the corner of one eye and managed a small, apologetic smile, sorry for the inconvenience of being human. 4 years, the interviewer asked softly, choosing the smallest possible question, as if anything larger might collapse the room. He nodded. 4 years. What followed was not a confession designed for trending charts. It was a measured unraveling. A chronology of small decisions that, collected, formed a cathedral of secrecy, the back entrances taken, the birthdays missed on purpose, photos framed so that a hand could be hers or no one's, the arrival time staggered by 10 long minutes, the way he learned the geography of shadows just so their silhouettes could never be traced together. Not because he was ashamed, he stressed. He was afraid of what attention would do to something delicate. The story did not run in a straight line. As real stories rarely do. It curved back to a year when both were younger. The kind of young that doesn't yet know how expensive it is to be careless. A script reading that turned into a late dinner, that turned into lingering at the curb because leaving is sometimes the hardest act. The moment that hooked him was small, how she listened, he said. Not with her eyes searching for her next line but with an unguarded stillness. As if she was collecting every word and returning it brighter. Listening, he learned, is a form of love. Then came the machine, the publicity cycles, the speculation economy, the ungenerous angle of lenses that prefer a scandal silhouette to truth's soft light. Protection became policy. If I keep her name outside the frame, he thought, I keep her safe. At first, it worked. The camera saw what it was told to see. The headlines found other feasts. And what hovered slightly beyond it, lived in the margins, where quiet things bloom best. But secrecy has a metabolism. Eventually it starts eating not only risk but also joy. In the studio. Searching for words. He arrived at this part carefully. Like a man crossing black ice. There were times, he said. I realized I was hiding not just her from the world, but the best parts of myself from her, the parts that are loud, playful, reckless. I was always calculating. I thought I was carrying the weight for two. Maybe I was just afraid of dropping it alone. The interviewer, trained to leave space where truth might grow, said nothing. The crew stayed still. The camera watched mercilessly and kindly. As cameras can when the person in front of them stops pretending they are anything but mirrors. He described seasons like chapters, a spring where they spoke mostly in jokes, a summer when schedules braided and then frayed, autumn where small distances felt like contemplations rather than endings, in the winter of his lone apartment, the cold one. With great light and no curtains, he wrote her letters he never sent. In one he kept, folded behind a receipt for oranges. Written, I want to keep the sky small so that when I look up, the only stars are the ones we choose. He smiled, embarrassed by the metaphor. I'm better at pretending on camera, he said. And the room warmed. There were pragmatic details sprinkled through the candor, colleagues who noticed and politely looked away. Managers who drafted contingency statements that never saw daylight. Friends who stayed friends by never asking for proof. And then the times the machine almost won, the rumor that came too close. The photo that almost had them both in it. Evening he stepped away from a restaurant because the flashbulbs had already found the door. No one asked the obvious question, what, exactly? Are you two? Because the answer at this altitude is never singular. Love. He implied without naming it. Can be many verbs before it is a noun. Can be a guarding and a letting go. It can be two people deciding that dignity is more romantic than spectacle. It can be a promise that, for now, doesn't need witnesses. Still, the sentence hovered. Unspent, I've hidden her. It wanted elaboration. He offered it with a gentleness that made the producer decide not to cut to commercial. I hid her joy when I chose doorways that dimmed it. I hid her kindness when I became suspicious of strangers who only wanted a photo and not a piece of us. I hid her, at times. Her own sunshine. Because I thought shadow equals safety. I didn't ask if she wanted that gift. A tissue rested in his palm. Slack as a flag after rain. He didn't use it. The tears had ebbed to sheen. What do you do in a moment like this, when a public figure steps off the polished road and onto the wild grass of truth? On social media, someone would clip and caption it in 30 seconds. Comment sections would bloom with certainty. Analysts would diagram the semantics of hidden. But in the studio, time held still. The interviewer asked if he had told her he would say this today. He shook his head. No. She wouldn't want credit for my courage, or my mistakes. The producer, eyes soft, finally called a break. The red-lamped-eyed people exhaled. But when the room decompressed into low voices and rattling cups, he stayed seated, watching the cooled light on the floor. The microphone was still pinned to his sweater. The sound engineer, not yet at the board, heard the softest sentence come through his headphones, I miss not being brave. In the hours that followed, the edit team began triage on something you can't really triage. The legal counsel asked for timestamps. Publicist, unusually quiet, sent a single message, if we air this, let it be whole. No pull quotes without context. No floating tears divorced from the architecture of what built them. The producer replied simply, agreed. By sunset, the city started to glow in panes. He left through a side door into an alley that smelled like rain on cement and the metallic aftertaste of stormlight. A handful of fans had formed at the main entrance. Their voices buoyant. Signs hopeful poetry. He heard them from a distance. The way you hear a song you loved before you understood what it meant. He didn't turn that way. Instead, walked until the alleys widened into a street with a view of the sky. There are days when a person can be an actor, a brand, a citizen of the machine. And there are days when he is simply a man wanting to be good. He pulled out his phone, opened the messaging app where one thread had learned the geography of time zones in silence, and typed without rehearsing, I said your name today. Oversend. Then added, I said it as gently as I could. I'm sorry for the years I thought hiding you was the same as loving you. He did not attach a photo. Not add a flower or a star. He sent it into the distance and put the phone back into his pocket. The sky dimmed in a patient gradient. A street vendor closed her stall with the ritual slowness of someone who loves small endings. He walked and did not try to name the feeling, grief, relief, both. Some truths are best left ungarnished. News, stubbornly indifferent to nuance, moved faster than any message. Somewhere between the edit suite and the night desk, someone made a call. And the next morning the headline traveled like weather. Song Kang opens up, I've hidden Kim Yoo-young for years. The subhead was kind. Almost protective. No scandal, only a man rethinking what it means to shield the people he loves. The broadcast aired that evening. Viewers watched the way people watch a friend tell a difficult truth across a kitchen table. His voice cracked at the same place. The issue remained just as unused. The cameras captured the moment he said years with the weight of each one inside it. And homes across cities tilted a little toward their screens. The clip outran the network within the hour, uploaded, captioned, translated, spun, devoured. In the flood there was an unexpected undertow of gentleness. The most liked comments didn't pry. They blessed. Quiet street across town. She watched in a white sweater with her hair up and her feet tucked beneath her. The way people do when they brace for impact. Opening minutes were difficult, old fear remembers. But when he arrived at the part about listening being love, her face changed. She paused the video and breathed. Pressed play again. Her phone buzzed against a cushion, messages stacking like petals. Are you okay? Do you want me to come over? Proud of you both. Even if I don't understand it. She set the phone face down and watched him finish the thought he had begun years ago on a curb. Summer wind warm on his sleeve. When it ended, she did not cry. Not yet. The emotion that flooded her chest was stranger, a quiet, structural relief. Like a house finally settling onto its foundation after a long wind. She picked up her phone. Opened the thread with the sky photos and unsent drafts and carefully spelled cautions. And typed 3 words that felt both impossible and inevitable. Thank you, finally. The reply arrived 5 dots later. Sorry, it began. And then the sentence fractured into tendernesses that do not belong to us. The following days were a study in how a culture metabolizes sincerity. The speculation industry arrived on schedule. Its knives and then, oddly, putting them away. Perhaps the years had changed us. Perhaps vulnerability had become fashionable enough to protect the vulnerable. Or perhaps the interview had made it embarrassingly clear that what lived between these two people could not be trimmed to fit a scandal's hunger. Colleagues reached out privately. Not with questions but with simple confessions of their own, times they hid, names they kept. The paradox of trying to nurture something by denying it air. Answered when he could. Mostly he listened. He realized that secrecy hadn't made him unique. It had made him ordinary in the most human of ways. When he finally spoke publicly again, it was not as a rebuttal or addendum but as a quiet continuation. I wanted to protect a light, he said. Forgot that light needs to be seen to stay warm. If I cause harm in the name of safety, I hope time and kindness will fix what I clumsily guarded. It is tempting to press toward resolution. Point toward a balcony or a handclasp or the soft, unmistakable physics of two bodies choosing to share a frame. But the truest thing about this chapter is that it didn't resolve, it reoriented. The axis shifted from fear to care. Hiding to holding carefully in public daylight. And then the work of ordinary days resumed, scripts read, sets called. Coffee cooled in paper cups. Evening, weeks later. A photographer waiting outside a rehearsal space accidentally captured a picture of the sky, a lucky mirror in a black car window. A brief reflection of a woman's profile and a man standing half-turned. Both laughing at something only they could hear. It was nothing. It was everything. The photo circulated without a caption. People looked, smiled, and, for once, closed the tab. When the interviewer from that original day wrote her follow-up notes, she found a line she had scrawled in the margin as he spoke. He is not trying to be brave. He is tired of pretending fear is love. It seems small, but it is the hinge upon which this story turns. Because after a long season of hiding a name to protect it, he finally understood, the gentlest shelter is the truth. Spoken softly, and left standing. Part 2, after the tears, the quiet. The city learns new weather after a storm, the way streets smell different. The way light takes its time returning. The way you speak lower because anything louder feels like disrespect. In the weeks after the interview, life didn't so much go back to normal as it did forward into a version of normal that had room for honesty. He kept working. The set. with its tape marks and coffee-ringed schedules, welcomed him like a disciplined friend. On lunch breaks, he ate in the canteen rather than behind a door. And then looked away. Gratitude has a shape, you can feel it in how near strangers give you space. Publicists, pragmatic poets that they are, revise their scripts. No more no-comment polygons around the subject. If asked. The line was simple, he spoke his truth carefully. He asks that we respect the people involved by not treating tenderness like evidence. Reporters, to their credit, largely did. There were missteps, because missteps are inevitable in rooms built for performance. A panel show clipped the word hidden and looped it over playful music. A talk radio host suggested hidden meant managed. The reaction was swift. And not from the usual places. Viewers who had felt his honesty as a personal favor wrote in with an unambiguous verdict, "Don't do that to him." The clip was withdrawn. An apology followed. The world, it seemed, practicing being kinder. In private, the conversations that matter unfolded like careful origami. They met in easy places, a park at dusk, a noodle shop that minded its own business, a stairwell between rehearsals where air smells like wood dust and old applause. This is where the most adult lines of the story were spoken, not the interviews. Grand statements but the workaday vows upon which a future can stand. "I wanted to keep you safe," he said. "You did," she answered. Then added the truth that both hurt and healed, "And you kept me small sometimes too." "I know. Don't do that again." "I won't." "Good," she said, with a smile that unknotted something ancient. "Because I don't want small. I want true." Is a busy word. It asks for dull logistical bravery, arriving together when you mean to. Warning a restaurant you won't sit in a corner. Texting a manager we're walking out the front. It asks you to accept that privacy and secrecy are not synonyms and that the former can bloom inside the latter's absence. It asks you to admit when you are scared and to let the other person decide what risk looks like for them. They practiced. They chose a gallery opening that was noisy and boring in the helpful way cultural events are. They stood side by side for a photograph with other artists. They're leaning in Nora way. It didn't trend. It didn't need to. In the quiet afterward, writing separately to the same address out of habit rather than paranoia, they sent each other the same message nearly at once. "That was easier than I thought." They laughed when they realized the timing and then, a minute later, didn't laugh because sometimes relief is holy. Everything softened. There were days when fatigue made tenderness brittle. There were late nights where he hid again, not her, but himself, behind jokes. And she recognized the old shelter and said so. There were moments the world tried to pull the story back into its favorite genre. But those moments punctured less because now there was an agreed-upon map. We meet in the light, we leave when it turns unkind. Work, too, changed flavor. Calls came with language about maturity and range. Once the words weren't code for something else. Directors asked for less varnish and more marrow. He gave it. Not by inventing pain but by refusing to bury it. Set one morning, dawn cold, fog low. Everyone speaking in scarves, the cinematographer showed him a frame on the monitor, his face in ordinary morning light. The eyes unarmored. "You're easier to read now," the cinematographer said. In a good way. He took it as the compliment it was. Found a similar frictionless path. Interviews that used to land like soft landmines now felt navigable. When a question pressed toward surveillance, he redirected with measured grace. When asked outright about the interview that had rearranged the weather, she chose a sentence that did not betray the privacy they had earned. He spoke bravely about fear. That's worth learning from. Headlines tried to make it more. X kept it exactly that. Fans, the true anthology writers of any public life, rewrote their narratives without malice. Edits changed tone, less forensic, more celebratory. Instead of mapping step counts across airports. Moments of empathy together, the way he reaches for water before a co-star asks. The way she lifts a junior actor's gaze during a panel. The story, freed from the oxygen of secrecy, grew up. Stopped needing to prove itself. And then came an evening that felt like a book's quiet last page. An announcement or a reveal. Nothing with fanfare or the lubricated gravity of a PR rollout. Just a small charity concert in a small theater where the acoustics forgive you for being alive. He went alone, hands in pockets. Anonymity of a cab he didn't bother to pull low. He arrived later with friends. Laughing the real laugh, the one that sounds like a door you want to walk through. At intermission, The lobby thrummed with the democratic closeness concerts create. Two paths converged at a table with paper cups and tolerant tea. He turned. She saw him. It was that simple and that grand. People nearby sensed the radius of something tender and stepped aside without instruction. They didn't touch, they didn't need to. They spoke in the efficient music of those who have built a little country between them. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she answered. "Okay. I am. You. I am." Smallest smile. The kind that fills rooms. "Good," she said. "Let's stay that way." Usher announced the second half. Lights flickered their kindly orders. As they drifted back toward their rows, he paused. The old reflex, that quick look for exits and angles, rose and then, this time, receded. He didn't scan the crowd for cameras. He didn't measure the moment for risk. He looked at her as if the world were manageable. As if the only thing required was to live. A song began, the kind whose chorus you know by the second time it arrives. They listened. Somewhere in the theater's darkness. Found their outlines and did what lenses do. The photo, when it surfaced the next morning, behaved like its subjects, unhurried. Unconcerned with tricking the eye into fever. Two faces in half-light. Angled toward a stage. Kind of stillness that cannot be faked because it is made of decision. The caption did not speculate. Good people, listening. No names. No arrows. Just a kindness offered back. And maybe that is the lesson the whole story was walking toward, that love, whether named or left beautifully nameless, does not require an alibi. And protection need not be a fortress without windows. Telling the truth softly can be the braver version of keeping it. That you can stop hiding a person not by making them a spectacle, but by standing beside them like ordinary light. Later, at a talk about craft rather than life, was asked the question that begins all the others, what changed for you this year? He thought for only a second. He said. That fear is a bad artist. The room smiled, then laughed. Then quieted the way rooms do when they understand they have been given a gift. Outside, evening warmed the city's edges. People walked home. Vendors closed. Somewhere a screen glowed and did not scroll. In an apartment where privacy is not a synonym for secrecy but for peace. A phone lit up with a message sent across a distance that no longer felt like an exile. Proud of you. Let's keep choosing light. It is tempting to call this an ending. But it is, finally, an ordinary beginning, the best kind. Where the sky is as big as it needs to be. The doors are taken at the front. Where names can be said out loud without trembling, and where tears. They come again. Tell the rest without asking for applause. Morning came without drama. The headlines had already softened, the noise of yesterday had folded into the slow hum of ordinary news. Yet somewhere in Seoul, the air still carried that fragile stillness that follows a confession heard around the world. Song Kang woke early. Before the calls and messages would begin. And sat by the window watching the light bloom across the skyline. First time in years. He felt no need to hide from it. He had expected fallout, interrogation. The usual tremor that follows honesty. Instead, what arrived was silence, warm, merciful silence. Fans wrote letters, not questions. Strangers on the street smiled and said nothing. And when he looked at the sky, it felt larger. As if truth had stretched the horizon itself. Kim Yoo-young's world moved with similar gentleness. Her team handled the press with grace. Her only statement was a short one, may kindness be louder than curiosity. It was enough. For once, kindness won. The machine of gossip stalled. Its appetite blunted by sincerity. People had seen too much of themselves in the story to turn it into spectacle. In private, the two of them spoke often, careful. Quiet conversations that stitched the gap left by years of avoidance. They didn't need to define what they were, they had already survived the hardest test of connection, being seen. Sometimes they spoke of work. Sometimes of weather. Sometimes of nothing at all. Every word felt like sunlight after rain. He told her about the message he'd sent that night after the interview. She laughed softly. Always say sorry before you say anything good. I didn't know how else to start, he replied. Next time, she said. Just start with the good. There would be next times, many of them. But they would not belong to the public eye. Learn to move through the world like two constellations, visible enough to be real. Distant enough to stay whole. It's passed, and the interview clip began to fade from trending lists. What remained were quiet ripples. People writing about the courage it takes to protect someone without erasing them. Fans sharing stories of their own hidden kindnesses. The phrase "I've hidden you for years" became a strange kind of benediction, no longer a sentence of guilt, but a promise to bring what matters into the light. When Song Kang returned to set, his colleagues noticed a difference. After came easier. The pauses shorter. The eyes unguarded. During a break, one of the younger actors asked how he managed to speak so honestly on camera. He thought for a moment and answered simply, "You stop pretending that silence is the same as strength." The younger actor wrote it down. In December, a charity broadcast invited several performers to read letters of gratitude on air. He agreed. When his turn came, studio lights dimmed to amber. He unfolded a small sheet of paper, its edges soft from being carried in a pocket too long. To everyone who listens when words are hard to find. Began, thank you. To the people who stand beside us quietly, thank you more. To the person who taught me that hiding love is not the same as keeping it safe, thank you most of all. He did not say her name. He didn't have to. Silence that followed was fuller than applause. Outside the studio, the night was clear. Snow had started to fall, fine. Weightless, patient. He tilted his head back, eyes half closed. But the flakes melt on his skin. Somewhere across the city, she did the same. Looking up from her balcony, a small smile tracing her lips. For a heartbeat, it felt as if the same snow connected them. Falling through distance, erasing everything unnecessary. Years would pass. The world would change its obsessions, forget its rumors, move on to newer stories. One would remain, quiet and golden, living in the memory of those who saw what honesty looks like when spoken softly. Sometimes, people still ask him about that interview. Always gives the same answer, "I didn't plan to say it. It just felt like it was time to stop hiding." Smiles, a little tired, a little proud, and adds, "You can't love someone in the dark forever." Somewhere beyond the reach of microphones and lights, Yoona keeps a letter in a small box by her window. The ink has faded, but the words still shine. Light doesn't ask for permission. It just finds you. To everyone who stayed to the end, thank you. This story was never about fame or scandal. It was about the quiet courage of two people learning that truth can be softer than fear. That confession can heal instead of hurt. Sometimes, the bravest act is simply to be seen. May you, too, find the light you once hid from. And when you do, let it stay. End of article.